Hi everyone, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to practice English speaking together using the shadowing technique. Shadowing is one of the most effective ways to improve your English speaking skills. By listening and repeating at the same time, you can develop more natural pronunciation, better rhythm, and greater speaking confidence.
With regular practice, shadowing can also help you improve your listening skills and speak more fluently in everyday conversations. Before we begin, let's quickly talk about shadowing. Shadowing is a powerful language learning technique where you listen to a native speaker and repeat what you hear immediately, at the same time as the speaker, without pausing the audio. Don't worry if you miss some words or can't keep up perfectly at first. That's completely normal. The goal is to copy the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and connected speech as closely as possible. Try to speak continuously, keep your voice active, and focus on following the flow of English rather than understanding every single word. Now, put on your headphones if you have them, and let's get started. The day I missed my flight. For most of my life, I considered myself a very organized person. I liked making plans. I liked arriving early. I liked knowing exactly what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. If I had an appointment at 10 o'clock, I would probably arrive at 9:45. If I needed to catch a train, I would get to the station at least 20 minutes early. Because of that, I never imagined that I would miss a flight. It seemed impossible. Unfortunately, life sometimes enjoys surprising us. And one morning, I learned that even the most organized people can make mistakes. It all started a few months ago. I was planning a short trip to another city. Nothing too complicated. The flight was only about 2 hours long, and I was going to stay for a few days. I had been looking forward to the trip for weeks. I had already booked a hotel. I had already made a list of places I wanted to visit. Everything seemed perfect. My flight was scheduled to leave at 8:30 in the morning. Since the airport was about 40 minutes from my home, I decided to wake up at 5:30. That would give me plenty of time. Or at least that's what I thought. The night before the trip, I finished packing my suitcase. I checked everything carefully. Passport, wallet, phone charger, headphones, extra clothes, travel documents. Everything was ready. I felt prepared. I felt confident. I felt completely in control. Then I made a small mistake. A very small mistake.
The kind of mistake that doesn't seem important at the time. Before going to bed, I set my alarm clock, or at least I thought I did. The problem was that I accidentally set the alarm for 6:30 instead of 5:30. I didn't notice. I put my phone down, went to sleep, and dreamed about my upcoming trip. Everything was fine. Until the next morning. Suddenly, I woke up. I don't know why. Maybe there was a noise outside. Maybe my body simply sensed that something was wrong. I looked at the clock. 6:47. For a few seconds, I stared at the numbers. My brain was still half asleep. Then reality hit me. 6:47. 6:47? My flight was at 8:30. I jumped out of bed immediately. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone. No missed alarm, no warning, nothing. That's when I realized my mistake. I had set the wrong time. I couldn't believe it. Of all the mistakes I could have made, it was the simplest one. For a moment, I just stood there in shock. Then, panic took over. I rushed to the bathroom. I brushed my teeth faster than I ever had before. I threw on some clothes. I grabbed my suitcase. I checked my passport 3 times. Then, I ran out the door. Normally, I like calm mornings. That morning was not calm. That morning felt like an action movie. As soon as I got outside, I ordered a taxi. The driver arrived a few minutes later. I put my suitcase in the back and got into the car. "Please hurry," I said. The driver looked at me in the mirror. "Running late?" he asked. "You have no idea," I replied. As we drove toward the airport, I kept checking the time. Every minute felt important. Every red traffic light felt personal. I knew the driver was doing his best, but I still wanted the car to move faster. Eventually, we reached the airport. I paid quickly, grabbed my suitcase, and ran inside. The airport was crowded. There were people everywhere. Families, business travelers, tourists. Everyone seemed calm. Everyone seemed relaxed. I was the only person running through the terminal like my life depended on it. I checked the departure screen. My flight was still listed. That gave me hope. Maybe I still had a chance. Maybe I could make it. I hurried to the airline counter. The employee looked at my ticket. Then she looked at her computer. Then she looked back at me. I already knew the answer before she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "Check-in has closed." My stomach dropped. I felt like all the air had left my body. I stared at her for a moment. I hoped she would suddenly change her mind. I hoped she would smile and say it was a joke. Instead, she gave me a sympathetic look. The flight was gone. I had missed it. For the first time that morning, I stopped moving. There was nothing left to do. No more running, no more rushing, no more hoping. I had missed my flight, and it was entirely my fault. For a few moments, I just stood there. I felt disappointed. I felt frustrated. Most of all, I felt angry with myself. How could I make such a simple mistake? I had spent weeks preparing for this trip. I had packed carefully. I had planned everything. And yet I had missed my flight because I set my alarm incorrectly. I wanted to blame something. The traffic, the airport, my phone. But deep down, I knew the truth. The mistake was mine. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Being angry wasn't going to help me now. I needed a solution. So I returned to the airline counter and asked if there was another flight available. The employee checked her computer. For a few seconds, she looked at the screen. Then she smiled slightly. "You're lucky," she said. "There is another flight this afternoon." I immediately felt relieved. Then she told me the price. My relief disappeared. The new ticket was much more expensive than the original one. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to do. I looked at my wallet. I looked at my phone. I thought about canceling the trip. Maybe this was a sign that I should stay home. But after everything that had happened, I didn't want to give up. I had already come this far. So I bought the new ticket. The flight would leave in about 6 hours. 6 hours! That was a long time to wait. At first, I felt annoyed. Then I decided to make the best of the situation. I found a seat near a large window and sat down. Outside, planes were landing and taking off. People walked through the terminal carrying bags and suitcases. the airport was full of movement. After a while, I went to get some coffee. As I stood in line, I noticed an older man looking confused. He was holding a boarding pass and staring at a sign. He looked worried. When he noticed me, he asked politely, "Excuse me, do you know where Gate 22 is?" I wasn't completely sure, but I had seen signs pointing in that direction. I showed him where to go. His face immediately brightened. "Thank you," he said. We started talking. A few minutes later, I told him about missing my flight. To my surprise, he laughed. Not in a rude way, in a friendly way. Then he said something I never forgot. "Don't worry. Almost everyone misses a flight at least once." I stared at him. "Really?" I asked. "Oh yes," he said. "I've missed 2. That made me feel much better. Until that moment, I felt like I was the only person in the world who had made such a mistake. Hearing his story reminded me that mistakes happen to everyone, even experienced travelers. We talked for a few more minutes before he left for his gate. As he walked away, he waved and wished me good luck. The simple conversation improved my mood. Later, I found a restaurant inside the airport and ordered lunch. Since I had so much time, I decided not to rush. I sat near a window and enjoyed my meal. For the first time that day, I felt calm. The disaster I had imagined wasn't really a disaster. Yes, missing the flight was inconvenient. Yes, it cost me extra money. But the world hadn't ended. The trip was still possible. A few hours later, I returned to the departure gate. This time, I arrived very early. Very, very early. I wasn't taking any chances. As passengers gathered near the gate, I started talking to a young woman sitting nearby. She was traveling alone. We began discussing travel experiences. When I told her about my morning, she laughed. Then she told me she had once gone to the wrong airport. "The wrong airport?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "There are 2 airports in my city. I went to the wrong one." We both laughed. The more stories I heard, the more I realized something. Travel rarely goes perfectly. People miss flights, people lose luggage, people take the wrong train, people get lost. It's all part of the experience. Eventually, boarding began. This time, I was one of the first people in line. I wasn't going to miss this flight, not after everything that had happened. I found my seat and sat down. As the plane started moving toward the runway, I felt a huge sense of relief. I had finally made it. A few minutes later, we were in the air. I looked out the window and smiled. The day had not gone according to plan. Not even close. But somehow, I was still on my way. A few hours later, I arrived at my destination. The moment I stepped out of the airport, I felt excited again. The stress of the morning was finally behind me. I took a train into the city and checked into my hotel. When I entered my room, I placed my suitcase on the floor and sat on the bed. Then I started laughing. The entire day suddenly seemed funny. Earlier that morning, I had been convinced that everything was ruined. Now, I was exactly where I wanted to be. The trip could finally begin. Over the next few days, I explored the city, visited interesting places, and enjoyed local food. I had a wonderful time. But surprisingly, the thing I remembered most wasn't a museum or a restaurant. It was the day I missed my flight. That experience taught me several important lessons. First, mistakes happen. No matter how organized you are, nobody is perfect. Second,
Problems are usually smaller than they seem in the moment. When I realized I had missed my flight, it felt like a disaster. A few hours later, it was simply an inconvenience. And finally, I learned that unexpected situations often introduce us to kind people. The airline employee who helped me, the older traveler who shared his story, the young woman who made me laugh at the gate. Without missing my flight, I never would have met any of them. Of course, I still try to be organized. I still arrive at airports early, and now I check my alarm at least 3 times before going to sleep. But whenever something goes wrong during a trip, I remember that day. I remember the panic. I remember the frustration. And I remember how everything worked out in the end. Missing my flight wasn't the beginning of a terrible trip. It was actually the start of a wonderful vacation.